I hope you're all having a fun and good day. If we haven't met, my name is Catalina. I am an executive in the domestic development team. So been here at ICMS for some time now, a couple of years. I specialize in the fashion and global brand management degree. I'm involved with the event management degree as well. And it's my absolute pleasure to have you all here in this session. This is a very, very special session because we have a fashion and retail marketing alumni. So please welcome Penelope Bell. Thank you very much. Have a seat.
Thank you.
Please. So Penelope, she graduated from ICMS. She did a Bachelor of Business majoring in retail marketing in 2012, so maybe a couple of years ago. She has worked in brands like Temple and Webster, then went to The Iconic, and now she's working in merchandising and buying for Ralph Lauren. So she's a great example of what can be done after getting a degree here at ICMS. She's going to share with us a little bit about her experience coming here first, what she did for industry training, and how she got to where she is now.
Thank you. Get up. Hi. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. As you just heard, my name's Penny, and I studied a Bachelor of Business Administration in Retail Services, which then changed to Retail Marketing in my second year, and I did that between 2010 to 2012. I came to ICMS as a 17-year-old fresh-faced high school graduate from a sheltered single-sex private school and an equally sheltered twin sister inhabited home. So it's fair to say that my eyes were pretty opened when I first came to study and live on the castle on the hill. Now, I probably wouldn't be a very good mentor if I dwelled too much on my on-campus living experience, but I'm sure I can wrap it up nicely by saying that some of my friends came here today to support me, along with my husband, who at the time was just an obnoxious group worker, but a pretty cute RA from Kelly House. I grew up wanting to be a fashion designer. Well, actually, I wanted to be a wedding dress designer, and I was inspired by Natasha Richardson in The Parent Trap. But after 5 minutes in art class and realising that my drawing skills were pretty slim to none, I set my focus on fashion buying. The perfect combination of art and science is what I was told once whilst doing work experience in Year 10, and that had me sold. The obstacle then for me was figuring out how one becomes a fashion buyer. There was no Buying 101 university degree, and in the pre-LinkedIn world, I didn't have access to others' career paths. But thanks to the savviness of my mother, we stumbled across a business and retail specific course in Sydney, and the absolute icing of the cake was that it was far enough from home that I could live here as well. From day one, I knew I'd found the right course, and I loved that I was able to have a general education and insight into business, whilst also having classes that were dedicated to retail. The retail course was very still new in my time, and which meant that I had a small but wonderful intake of only 12 students who all had quite different career ambitions, which made group conversation pretty insightful. Unlike school, my intake not only had multiple genders, but also a diverse group of nationality and ages, and the majority of the February 2010 intake for retail were actually mature age students, and over half of them were internationals. This exposure to new ideas and experiences really added to my education and my ability to learn from a diverse group of people. In addition to my diverse classmates, I also really enjoyed the diverse teaching staff that I came across over my 3 years at ICMS. Each lecturer had quite a wealth of knowledge, and we were taught by the likes of self-made millionaires, entrepreneurs, and professional academics. And it meant that I still find myself to this day reflecting on some of the lessons I learnt in the classrooms. I'll never forget one lecturer who, a very successful businessman, he explained to a room full of wide-eyed young adults just why the government makes you pay for those parking tickets. I think about it all the time and curse the government for all the money they've taken from me. But as I've already brushed on, group work was a big and memorable part of my time here at ICMS. Whilst at the time it felt like a bit of a punish and you never knew if it was a blessing or a curse if you got to choose your group or not, I think 10 years on I finally understand the importance being placed on it. The emphasis that ICMS places on being able to work with people despite their age or background, I truly believe has given me an advantage within my career, and it still serves me to this day. A real highlight for me was the first ever group assignment that we did in the Introduction to Retail Management, where a team of other first year retail students and myself had to create and pitch a business plan for a new retailer on the Corso in Manly. Now, for this, I need you to cast your mind back to 2010, and it was the peak of the cupcake era. Katy Perry was wearing them on stage. Every 21st birthday party was celebrated with a cupcake tower, and cupcake-specific bakeries were everywhere. So we thought, well, what's going to be next? With Manly Corso inundated at the time with clothing retailers, we knew that we wanted somewhere to allow people to sit and relax after a day of shopping or being at the beach. And with the cupcake market very much saturated, we turned to macaroons. Adriana Zumbo had just appeared on MasterChef, and the macaroon was starting to be something that was known to those outside of Paris. So with the help of a mature-age student and her interior design background, we created a stunning macaroon saloon from the Manly Corso. The college and the lecturers' encouragement to think big and practical in our studies was a theme that continued over the 3 years at ICMS, and it allowed for graduates to enter their careers with so much more than just some GPA courses or knowing that you were really, really good at studying the night before an exam. And on the topic of practical learning, I of course have to mention industry training, which was also a refreshingly unique part of the ICMS education. With retail still very much in its startup phase, there wasn't a huge amount of experience or opportunities for the students when it came to industry training, which is something that I hope has changed now, but if it isn't, let me know. And I took a job at David Jones working in the Bondi store, whilst also putting my hand up for all of the extra tasks from stock take, consolidations and transfers, visual merchandising, receiving of the new season stock, basically anything that would put me in the head office. It was a really insightful 9 months for me, and I left well and truly knowing where my passions did not lie, that they did not lie in customer service, and even more surprisingly, visual merchandising, and that unlike a lot of my classmates, I didn't really want to climb the in-house retail ladder. So I returned to college the following May with more ambition than ever to be a buyer, in the comfort of the office and away from customers. This was a really important learning for me, and one that I actually shared with a lot of my friends at the time, that learning what not to do or what you don't want to do is just as important as learning where your passions do lie. Industry training gave me that extra motivation to really push myself in the business subjects, anything that had a math or Excel focus, because that's quite important. And it also gave me a nice new lens for my retail-specific classes. Fast forward another wonderful year and a half of studying and living within these grounds, and I saw my marks continue to improve as my motivation came from first-hand knowledge of the type of job that I wanted after I graduated. I jumped into the college life, I joined the SRC, I became a cute RA myself, and I pretty much signed up for everything that you could do to really round out my experience at ICMS. As a slight tangent, I'd really, really recommend doing that, because it is the type of place where you get out what you put in, and the time here goes really fast. So then it was the end of 2012, we sat our final exams, we doled ourselves up for the end of term dinner, and we bid a bittersweet farewell to the strangers in the classroom and across the corridor who were now basically family. I moved back home and began my search for my first real job. And I was about to learn another very important lesson. In my industry, and when it comes to most industries, the old cliche, not what you know, but who you know, and a foot in the door is very important. So I sat on Seek applying for every job with the word assistant or buyer in it, not really knowing what I was signing up for day to day, day after day. But I was actually lucky enough to go to Christmas lunch and sit across from a cousin who just started a styling job at the brand new homewares company, Temple & Webster. It had just 2 buyers at the time, and they were desperately in need of some help. So I padded out my resume as much as someone could who had a 9-month stint at David Jones, some university work and a fake job with their dad. And in the ultimate cringe move, I attached my final exam results and a letter from the dean, and I crossed my fingers and sent it away. A few weeks later, driving home from ICMS, I received a phone call from the CEO of Temple & Webster, and a week later, I had an interview, because at the time things moved really fast in the startup world. So after still the strangest interview of my life, where I sat in the 40-degree heat in a warehouse talking to the CEO and the head of buying at the time, who just fanned themselves with my resume, I peeled my pencil skirt off the couch. Another side tangent, there's not all industries where you have to wear business attire. And the CEO stopped me and asked me what the folder in my hand was. I sheepishly replied that was my GPA, my exam results, and a letter from the dean. He was actually quite surprised. He replied that he was also quite a hard worker at university and was quite disappointed at how little that mattered once you graduated. So he gave my little folder a 2-minute scan and offered me a job the next day. I've hired countless of assistant and admin buyers over the years, and every time I take the time to sit the interviewee down and say, well, what's a personal highlight for yourself? Because I know firsthand just how daunting it can be to try to get a foot in the door when your resume is very minimal. And all you have is ambition and a good work ethic. It can often feel like an awkward chicken of an egg situation because you're starting to get a foot in the door and all anyone wants to know is what your experience is. But my advice here was to use your network. Whether it's friends, families, lecturers, peers, or even myself after today, always back yourself and show off your assets, even if they feel very irrelevant at the time, because you never know what's going to spark someone's interest. After two whirlwind years at the tiny startup of Temple & Webster, my team of 3 quickly developed into an established buying team of 12 with forecasts and processes and all the things that I was lucky enough to be a part of the implementation of. Included in the growth was a buying manager and the first professional mentor that I'd encountered, who is still today in my network. The buying manager brought a really nice air of calm and professionalism amongst a very hectic startup culture at the time, and it was an attitude that I gravitated towards instantly. Through this mentor, I found myself thriving to have a calm demeanour and a professional confidence and decisiveness behind every decision I make. I was grateful to be able to call myself an assistant buyer and the exposure to the world that it had for me, but the fashion part of what I was doing at Temple & Webster was really lacking, and I knew that homewares wasn't really my calling. I'd always dreamed of studying abroad, and I won't bore you with the depths of my internet search, but I found a post-fashion buying degree in Ireland. It wasn't quite the fashion capital of the world, but they spoke English there, they allowed you to go to Paris for the trade shows, and it included an 8-week internship. So I packed my bags, I said goodbye to my friends, family, and the cute RA, and off I went. And a postgraduate degree was intense, but it was great. And again, I found that the work experience really helped in rounding out my education. The university had really strong relationships with all the major retailers in Ireland and a handful in the UK. And so by summer, I'd pretty much drunk at every pub in Dublin, so I chose to do my internship in London. I worked as a buyer's admin assistant, which is the entry-level job for buying in Europe and the UK, for a company that, unlike Temple & Webster, actually did something that we called product development. And that's basically when you design the products that you're selling from the get-go. It results in a lot of correspondence with factories in what my colleagues referred to as the Far East, which is China and Vietnam and the likes. And in this role, I was able to understand the ins and outs of a fashion buying office and really what different directions a degree in buying can take you. Again, my work placement allowed me to learn not only what I really liked about this part of the job, but what I really didn't. So I left London knowing that yes, buying was for me, yes, fashion, but no to product development. I graduated from that degree in the January of 2016 and returned home with a very specific idea of the type of job that I was now on the hunt for. I wanted branding, not product development. I wanted fashion, I wanted buying, and unbeknownst to me at the time, my time at Temple & Webster had left me with quite a niche skill set in e-commerce, which was a very new concept at the time. Therefore, when a role came up at The Iconic, the then 4-year-old online retailer came to my attention, it just felt like the perfect fit. This time, with a post-grad degree and some buying experience under my belt, I was able to leave the letter from the dean at home, and I secured myself as a buyer's admin within the women's wear fashion team. On the second interview, I ran into an old Temple & Webster colleague, and I learnt for the second time just how important it is to have a strong network around you. The Iconic was a whole new world for me, mostly due to its size. There were 10 different versions of me across the buying floor and almost 50 buyers and planners in total. It was very easy to feel quite dwarfed by the size of the company and the team. However, like at ICMS, I just threw myself in the deep end, pretty much signed myself up for any opportunity, and so began the next 6 years of my life. Over my time at The Iconic, I worked under 8 different buyers across 5 different teams, and it was truly enlightening experience every time I found myself with a new leader. The vast difference in people's management and leadership skills and the general way that they conduct themselves professionally, it surprised me a lot. I can honestly say that probably only 2 of those 8 buyers I actually saw as any real mentor or aspirational leader. And the other 6, some Miranda Priestley in nature and others a bit more Anna Delvey in experience, they taught me the type of leader that I didn't want to become. Unconfident, frantic, pushing pressure down or married to the job were all what not to do lessons that I took very much on board. After 3 years in various admin and assistant roles, I took a chance on myself and I applied for my dream role at the time, which was the buyer of the men's designer team. Again, I was pretty inexperienced for this role, but I threw myself into the next step in the interview process, and that process included creating a SWOT analysis for the then current men's designer assortment. I now laugh at myself and the lack of data and the abundance of images that I put into the SWOT analysis, but again, you never know what's going to hit home for a future employee. The last slide that I had in that SWOT analysis was an opportunity that I saw in how we should deliver our stock. I pitched the idea of men in suits, on bicycles, in the QVB, handing out iconic packages to the menswear customer. For some reason, this really resonated with the head of menswear, who was really amazing and turned that buyer role into a junior buyer role, and he took a punt on the 26-year-old assistant buyer from the rival women's wear team. The head of menswear at the time, Tom Simpson, became an instant mentor for me that day, and the reason that I have any sort of experience that qualifies me to be standing here today. Under Tom's mentorship and constant asking of where my men in bicycles were, spoiler alert, it's very expensive and very inefficient, I was absolutely thrown into the deep end of buying and managing. As a junior buyer, I had an assistant and an admin reporting directly into me, and one was senior in my age. So I was very much challenged daily to reflect on the wonderful and not so wonderful lessons that I'd learned from the managers before me. As a buyer of over 50 brands, the working relationships that I actually had with those brand managers and agents actually became more important to me than my colleagues back in the office. The fashion industry in Australia is very, very small. It was quite a regular occurrence to get an email from a brand manager saying, "Hello, today's my last day at this brand," and then on Monday receiving an email from the same name but different email domain that read, "Hello, today's my first name at the new brand." So the term "don't burn your bridges" is a vital one in this industry. Building personal and professional relationships was something that I'd subconsciously observed from previous managers and mentors over the years. And when it was my turn to drive, I found myself regularly challenged with ensuring that brands liked working with me on a day-to-day basis, but then they also had to respect me. One relationship with a brand that was particularly important was the wholesale team at Ralph Lauren, who was our largest menswear brand at the time. The relationship and mentorship that I had internally with Tom and then externally with the Ralph team ended up being a career-changing one for me when earlier this year I had the opportunity to interview for a role at Ralph Lauren within their buying and merchandising team. I learnt through the process that having a good mentor means that they'll support you regardless of what your next move is, and that also having that perfect balance between professional and personable is very helpful, especially when you're interviewing with someone that you were doing contract negotiations with the day before. And so after 6 years at The Iconic, in April, I packed up my desk, which wasn't very hard after 2 years of working at home, and I moved to the Ralph Lauren offices. It was a much smaller building, a much smaller headcount, but a whole new challenge. Over the past 4 months at Ralph, I have again been challenged with what a good leader looks like. A new challenge for me is how to be new and be a leader, how to not understand an email or any of the jargon that it contains, yet still be able to help my team respond to it. I'm learning how to sit back, how to listen, observe, and ask questions. A lot of questions. And how to be the new person again after years of being the veteran in the office. I'm yet again grateful for my experience of working with diverse teammates, as half my team is based in Hong Kong and the head office of Ralph is in New York. So I'm able to learn from a whole new group of people with skill sets and knowledge that is developed from having very contrasting backgrounds to my own. 8 years into my buying career, and I find myself working with people who I actually haven't encountered professionally before. So I continue to learn the many ways in which people lead as well as wish to be led. Each step, whether it's small or large, that we take professionally really does result in a lesson to be learnt and an opportunity to strengthen ourselves as employees, as leaders, and just ultimately as humans. Mentorship as you climb the corporate ladder dons many different meanings, and I'm learning to navigate this new and exciting step in my career, just how important it is to self-reflect and ensure that all of those wonderfuls and not so wonderful lessons that we learnt along the way are front of mind with each next step. So my parting advice to any aspiring fashion buyers in the audience would be to take some risks, to back yourself, to value motivation and hard work over everything else, and that the industry is very small and it's unique in the way that there's no one path to get you to the career that you want. So keep learning, keep networking and growing as a person, and you'll be surprised at the strange and wonderful doors that can open along the way. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I'll invite you to have a seat and we can have a little bit of a chat. I personally think that this was very inspiring. I'm pretty sure that everyone in the room can agree with that. I just have a couple of questions for you. So, taking into account that you came to ICMS, you graduated 10 years ago? Mm-hmm. So the degree at the moment that we have, and I don't know if you all know this, but we are the only institution in New South Wales that combines both fashion and business in the same degree. As Penelope just said, she was interested into design, but then she realized that she wanted the management side of things. So how do you think that the fact of having that business component in your degree, that it wasn't just retail or fashion specifically, how do you think that made a difference to your career?
Yeah, it was super important. When I was interviewing, kind of initially when I'd first graduated, a lot of the places that I was interviewing for, they really actually didn't mind what your degree was, as long as it had a business underlying to it. Yeah. And I think something that is not so much the glamorous side of the fashion industry, but an experience with Excel and math and P&L statements and things like that is really, really important. So even when I'm hiring now, I find myself gravitating towards people that have a bit more of a similar education to me, because I know it kind of just fills that gap that if you've come from a straight fashion degree, you may not have touched a calculator in the last 4 years, and it's going to be a rough buying trip if you haven't done that. So it's very, very important to have that business underlying.
Yeah, right. And then another thing I wanted to know, you were just talking about the whole experience of industry training when you were back here. How do you think that was important? So I found something very interesting, and it was when you said you need to know what you're good at and what you enjoy, but you need to know what you don't like.
Yeah, definitely.
How was that playing into your career?
Yeah, for me it was really important because I hadn't really worked before I came here, and I don't think if it wasn't for industry training, apart from maybe getting a retail job on the course or something, I don't think I would have proactively gone out and got that experience. And so you just kind of win 2 years back in your life, because then instead of graduating and then kind of going and learning what you're not enjoying so much, you've learnt it whilst you're still studying, and it just allows you to kind of hit the ground running a lot more in terms of being able to pinpoint the type of job that you want after you graduated.
Yeah, that makes sense. Sure. And that's also related to what you were just saying about the importance of networking, the people that you know. Sometimes you can meet people in different days, different situations. It can be working, it can be during the weekend, but you never know what impact they're really going to have in your life, right? So I can imagine that industry training and the people that you met and all the networking that you did really made a difference after you graduated. You were also talking about the mentors that you had in your career. At the moment, we really want to push that mentorship angle, because at ICMS we keep saying you're more than just a number. We look at you as a person, but we notice that the difference that it makes to have a one-on-one relationship with your lecturers, with the people that are around. Say, I personally am a part of the Future Students team, but I've heard it from my students so many times. They see me as a role model. They see me as who they want to be in a couple of years from now. So that's also really, really important. And how do you think, what was it like when you started looking for mentors? What were you looking at on people?
Yeah, it's funny that you asked that, because I don't think I ever actively went out of my way to find a mentor until I had one, and then the gap in not having one is so big. So when I started my career, everyone was frantic because it was a startup and no one knew what they were doing. And then as soon as that buying manager came in and she became a mentor, I haven't not been able to have one since then. So it's very much kind of ignorance is bliss. But once you have someone in your life that's driving you in a direction, when they're gone or when you move on and that gap is open again, it's a gap that's so obvious, because it's just nice to have a direction in mind. It's nice to see someone. And I always say, if you don't like what your boss is doing, or if you don't like what the next step in your career is doing, then you're probably in the wrong job at that time. Being able to look ahead to someone, especially when you start a career and there is, a little bit more of the brunt of what you have to do, having somebody to look up to and be like, if I work really hard, I'll get to have that role or that attitude or that energy, is, it's really important, and it just keeps you sane ultimately, because it can be crazy when you first start out.
That is very true. Well, thank you so much. I could go on and on, but I'll open it up for questions if you guys have any. So, do I see any hands up? Anyone? No? Well, we still have a little bit of time. You go, of course. Give me just 1 second till you get the mic. Thank you.
Would you say that it was more competitive in relation to like your peers when you were going into the industry? So let's say like when you were with somebody else who did the degree, what gave you that extra edge to somebody else that was in your degree that made them choose you?
Yeah, for me, I got really lucky in terms of my edge being my cousin at the time, or my network, because I wouldn't have been aware of the Temple and Webster. We were all sitting on Seek together, which I know ages me a lot, but it was like the only platform to get a job at the time. We were all sitting on Seek together. We were applying for the same jobs, but being able to know someone that knew about a job that wasn't on the platform, whether it's LinkedIn or anything else, that helped me a lot. And a referral is really important too. Like if I'm interviewing now and a team member who I really respect brings a resume to me versus one that I found online, you naturally gravitate towards that because you're like, I like you, and therefore I'm going to like people in your world as well. So and you never really know how you're going to find that person who's going to give you a foot in the door, because they don't necessarily need to be within your industry either, but just finding somebody who's going to put your resume on the right person's desk instead of it coming in, say, via email or via a platform. I think that's a huge, huge edge to have, absolutely.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much again for coming. I think it must be good to come back after a couple of years. So,
nice.
Yeah, thank you all so much for joining us today. We still have food, and yeah, I think this is the last session of the day, but there's still some food if you want to have a look around. There's still some campus tours happening, so hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and yeah, thank you again.